This is a sign talking about a proposed change in land use that, to me, should be known by people who are outside the place where it's posted. In fact, the people most affected by it are probably the least informed by it. When there are these changes in land use proposed, and they're all over this area, they are posted so the people just passing by on the street can see them. But they aren't posted provincially, and I think this is a provincial concern for reasons which I'll get into quite soon, or even internationally. The area down here below me is like the Ellis Island of Calgary. For decades it's been the place where immigrants come first, or where they're transshipped on their way to other parts of the city. There's a sign here that says the bridge is building an urban legacy, and the area around here is packed with the name bridge or crossing or Bridgeland, which is especially ironic because the overall community name is Bridgeland Riverside. The Riverside portion of it is defined by redevelopment occurring along major transportation corridors, some of which are dictated by the presence of the Bow River, and the other one is Edmonton Trail. So there's an east-west section, which we're in now. McDougall Road is pretty much the center of this part of the neighborhood. And down there farther is Memorial Drive, which is symbolically quite important because this place is full of bits that have been memorialized. This used to be a baseball diamond. Just behind me, where we've had a tall building put in, is where the old community center used to be, and which was a wide one that was useful for many functions, but has been replaced by a narrow one just up the hill behind me, where the meeting is going to be. And that one is not wide enough to accommodate things like flea markets and so on, but the area had to take what they could get because the general hospital was demolished, which used to be the center of the community. Now here is where the baseball diamonds used to be. This is very low land. It's 3 feet below where I'm standing. It's filling up with water. And over there is the site where there also used to be a baseball diamond, and baseball diamonds were taken out after about $1 million of work was done to repair them just before they were torn up. And this was put instead, but the developer ran out of money, I believe, partway through, and just after the basement was finished. So they stopped after the basement was dug, and the hole promptly began to fill in with water, which is quite ironic because where the old community center used to be here, there used to be an outdoor pool, which they tore up because it was supposedly uneconomic. So if we look down along this way, there is a false front to the community, and I really wanted to say this because we hear a lot about fake news these days, but not much about fake geography, which is a symptom of what goes wrong with when people are lied to in the process of planning and development. Here's an example here. His sign has got the usual bridges thing on it, and none of these new things they're proposing are making any new connections between buildings or making it any easier to get from one place to another. When this was a baseball diamond, you could have walked straight across this and cut across this because it was presumably a public property park. And now it's labeled as private property, even though it was the city then and it's the city now. There are no new connections being made here to make it any easier to get around on a day like this when it's snowing. And this is of critical importance because Calgary is a place of very changeable weather. You can go from tropical to Arctic or continental to Pacific in a few hours, and there is this problem with forecasting the weather because we're just east of the mountains, and the mountains cause patterns to break up and reform. Now out behind me here, or ahead of me, is a sign you might just barely able to see a couple letters of, which says Bridgeland, and it's adjacent to the Bridgeland Memorial LRT station. This is a false front to the community because we aren't in Bridgeland. The whole thing is called Bridgeland Riverside, and this is the Riverside portion of it that was developed in parallel to Memorial Drive and runs east-west. It would actually be in the southeast if it weren't for the fact that the river doesn't run exactly east-west and cuts slightly to the south. So Center Avenue is essentially the border between these two different portions of the community. This Bridgeland, combined with the tall buildings that have recently been put up, walls off the community, which is ironic because the people making the presentation said the exact opposite, that they're all against walling off of communities. And it's a memorial for reasons people might not realize. Up the hill here, on the slightly elevated proportion of the land where you don't have to worry so much about flooding, is the area known as Bridgeland. There's a guy called Hurtin Hippie who does video blogs, and you can look at his if you want to see a tour of the area. But a lot of people here live here for years and don't realize that they're actually in Riverside and not Bridgeland. It's important because Bridgeland is one of the most strangely named communities around. It's an upland spot, slightly elevated above the river floodplain, and it has no river and almost no bridges whatsoever. And almost all the names that say bridge crossings or Bridgeland because of this recent development are now outside of Bridgeland. They're actually in Riverside. Conversely, Riverside has almost no place names whatsoever that actually say Riverside. There's only one historical one left that shows the north-south segment by a parallel to Edmonton Trail. That's called Riverside Bungalow, 711 6A Street northeast or so, or 7th Street. And so there's one other one in the direction I'm walking now, and that's Riverside Park. These were examples at one time, where the whole community was, of an ideal type of urban development at some points. People had these various concepts over the years of what a great community should be, or the ideal city should be, which one woman in the book The Death and Life of Great American Cities summarized as the Radiant Garden City Beautiful. There's also a documentary about Calgary called Radiant City, arguing against the fact that suburbs are supposed to be the great things. The Radiant City, ironically, is a concept that the ultimate city design would be a tower in the middle of a park, which is what they're proposing right behind where I just showed the sign. Now, the ideal after that was an area with lively storefronts and lots of eyes on the street. And that's what you got essentially along First Avenue. But that area could not be supported by the train, the new train we have. From about 1909 to 1950, Calgary had trolleys on the streets. And trolleys eventually had to be replaced because of the very thing we're seeing today, snow. They couldn't handle snow, and some of them would slip on the tracks. So they were replaced by cars and buses. Here's a map of the area here. And the part down below Center Avenue, over to about 7th Street or so, and south. The south part is the Riverside portion. The part parallel to Edmonton Trail going north is also the Riverside portion. So Riverside is the west and south of this map, and Bridgeland is the north and east portion. I'm going to try and get you over here to the sign. This was a garden city in a way. Calgary is lucky compared to a lot of cities, and they don't have as many of these outrageously named communities where they're named after what was destroyed. One example of this would be ranchlands. Of course, it's not anything like a ranch anymore, it's all suburbs. But there are a lot of places in Calgary named woods or forest in the community name, and that is actually true, because Calgary was bald prairie mostly before it was made into a city, and people want to plant trees when they move in. So we have this urban city in Calgary that wouldn't be here if it weren't for the people. That's one positive thing that's happened with most of the city. But now the proposed density of development in places like this, the last surviving baseball diamond, and some facilities for disabled and older people, is about to be lost, because there's a plan, the East Riverside Development Plan, designed to replace all of this with tall buildings. This is worrisome to me because it could make the flood of 2013 look like a picnic. This is an area where people have reported that the water table is only a few feet below the surface, in the same public consultation meeting where they said that this spot is not on the Bow River floodplain. The Bow River can essentially be reached by digging down only a handful of feet. And it's a tremendous resource here, showing the basic problem that people always seem to want to build on the best agricultural land, because you can irrigate with great ease. You can't help but irrigate here. If you dig a little bit to put in your foundation, water springs out. And very clean, pure water, by the way, which unfortunately doesn't seem to be used much. They have made an effort around here to beautify the neighborhood, and they put up all these signs saying what the various features are, and they've made an effort to rehabilitate some of the damage that was done when things like Memorial Drive were widened and tore out things like hotels and businesses that had been the heart of the community. Now this is Riverside Park, or what was. I don't know if the sign has even survived now. It used to be the second last sign in the neighborhood that had Riverside on it. Oh, there it is. Okay, it still exists. I managed to get it in time. Now, this is the spot where if you're an immigrant and, you know, the international criminals are tearing out your government and, you know, going after you because you're an oil producing company or country that doesn't want to go on the US dollar, this is probably where you're going to end up. Or if you want to leave what is supposedly a crowded country and come to an open one with fewer than 10 people per square mile, this is also where you'll perhaps want to come. But that way of life, at least in this part of the city, is disappearing. They're making an effort to cram as many people as they possibly can on the very land that's most vulnerable to damage. And the people they're putting there are the most vulnerable people. The old, the infirm, the mentally ill, the immigrants. And this is particularly worrisome to me because there have been experiments done by the National Institutes of Mental Health in the United States to see how many rodents you could cram into a space before they all went nuts. And the Mental Health Institute found that at a certain population density, there's no need for cats or traps or cold or any of the things, or lack of food that could destroy rodents, because they would destroy themselves. They'd start fighting amongst each other, they'd become socially withdrawn, they'd lose the rodent equivalent of marriage and jobs, and they'd lose their life skills and forget them and not be able to get them back. So there's a great potential hazard in what we're doing in this supposedly wide and empty country. Here's some of the new buildings seen from the other side. So they're all labeled bridges, and we're looking at them from Riverside Park. So there's this thing that what happened, the strangest things, what happened to mice when you put them in this supposedly perfect environment that a guy had designed, was that they forgot how to tunnel. They stopped tunneling, which would normally be a natural behavior for mice, and just rolled the dirt into balls instead. And that's what seems to be happening here, in that people aren't looking at the possibilities of building the ideal city by putting part of it underground so that you can still grow things on the top. People, particularly in Bridgeland up in this direction, starting at the top of that hill, are very fond of gardens. It's an area renowned for gardens, and it used to be a major production area of vegetables for the city before the general hospital was taken away.